president in 2019?
Wow. At the time, the way the election that I observed back in 1991 went, the possibility was certainly there. You know, he has been in charge of Cameroon, I think, longer now than I believe any other serving African head of state. Maybe Obiang, but I think definitely there. The problem is, with such long service, so many fundamental problems have gone unaddressed, and we see this now in the northwest, southwest, or what some people call the Anglophone region of Cameroon. In addition, you know, Cameroon has two very serious problems. One is in the north with Boko Haram, ISIS, West Africa. And in that part of it, we are working very closely with the Cameroonians as allies to address the problem of terrorism. The more fundamental problem, and in my view, the more existential problem for Cameroon is what's going on in the Anglophone region. The government has been totally, in my view, ineffective in addressing that. Some of their actions have actually worsened what is going on there. There's been just a mounting cycle of violence from both sides. The radicals in the northwest, the ones who call themselves the Ambo Boys, and then the security forces. We've had horrendous loss of life, casualties. I think October, November, December of last year were the three highest. Now it's somewhat decreased. The great majority of the casualties are those on the Anglophone side. The Cameroon government is just not being proactive in addressing this problem.
And will you be meeting with President Biya?
I certainly hope so. We have asked that. Of course, it's up to the Cameroon government as to who I meet with.
And will you be asking for the release of Maurice Kamto, the presidential candidate?
I will. I will. I think that would be a very positive gesture. There are a number of, I think, gestures the Cameroon government could do immediately, which would start to diffuse the problem. But at the end of the day, it's going to require dialogue, open dialogue, no conditions dialogue to get to the heart of the problems. U.S.
Assistant Secretary of State Tibor Nagy, many thanks for joining us here in the France 24.
Thank you very much for your time.
And thank you for being with us.
Attendez d'abord. Il finit d'abord et puis. Oui. Il doit être surpris. Ah. Pointis de BH. Allez, bombardez. Charge. Commencez le feu.
The issue on the Anglophone piece, I won't go into detail on that. I think the article plus the video this morning did a very good job of explaining the history of how it got to the point where we are today. In October of 2017, when it came kind of to a head, the Anglophone states said we want to actually form our own state, the Ambazonia state. There have been issues there with atrocities, issues with allegations of law of war issues, and this is something that it brings all this to a head. Over the last several months or so, the State Department has put on hold several security force assistance programs. Right before the election in October, I, with the ambassador, went and paid a visit with President Biya, and we had a very direct conversation with him with regards to investigation of these atrocities, transparency of these atrocities, and appropriate battlefield behavior. Since that time, the State Department has made a decision not to allocate significant money, but at the same time, they've released some money that's been on hold to things like Scan Eagle and Cessna aircraft that assist in the Boko Haram fight in the north. We still have programs that we continue with them, all kind of small engagements as well as exercises. We talked about the state partnership program with Nebraska. We put that on hold, and in conjunction with the ambassador, AFRICOM, we decided not to pursue that because it wouldn't have been a good place for that particular group to be, so we put a halt to that. So the bottom line is right now in Cameroon, they have been a good partner with us counterterrorism-wise, but you can't neglect the fact that they have there are alleged atrocities and what's going on there. And so we continue to take our cues from the State Department and from the ambassador, and our level of engagement will continue, but not get out ahead of what the State Department would say is if we have to take other actions. We were very emphatic with President Biya that the behavior of his troops, the lack of transparency, could have a significant impact on our ability to work with them.
Great.
About the happenings in Africa right now, but since Ethiopia has totally changed course, Cameroon is the country that I hear more about from members of Congress. Thanks to the activity of the Cameroonian diaspora, by the way, because they definitely let their views be known. So there is, in effect, a civil war going on in the part of Cameroon which formerly was a British colony, because Cameroon had been two former colonies, British and French. They came together, they voted for one country under a federation, but the federation was done away with Cameroonian president. So now the Anglophones are basically fighting for their rights, which started with very serious complaints, and unfortunately the government of Cameroon has not responded in a way that would assuage the concerns of the Cameroonians. The United States government's policy, and I'll say current policy, is to recognize the current borders of Cameroon. I'll say that's the current policy. As far as energy, something not a lot of people realize, that out of the 54 countries in Africa, there are only 4 that are neither pumping nor searching for oil or gas, which means, as I said before, that it is an incredibly, incredibly rich continent. And it seems, so far, it has been incredibly rich for colonial powers, for the governments in place. It has not been rich for the people who live there. That's something that we desperately have to change. So I know you would want me to give a different answer, but right now I can give you what the U.S. government policy is. But you know, as I said, we have had so much good news from Africa. Last year, look what's happened in Ethiopia. Look what's happened in the Horn of Africa. Look what's happened in Angola. More recently, look what's happened in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which for the first time in its history may actually become democratic and a republic. And maybe the world's richest country may actually share some of its wealth with its own people. So look what's happened there. Look what happened yesterday in Sudan, with people power overthrowing the corrupt, bloodthirsty regime of President Omar al-Bashir. So I will just say, my next concern is Cameroon. And you know how I feel about hating the violence that's going on there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
is authorized to issue both presidential statements, subject to consensus among council members, and notes which are used to make declarations of intent. But Southern Cameroonians are already appealing to Nikki Haley to look their way. A tweet replying to Haley's congratulations says the people of Southern Cameroon hope you will do justice to them and help salvage the double standards you have decried about the UN. Hashtag Stop War Now.
On the 7th of June this year, the Guardian newspaper ran a special feature on the brutal campaign of violence by the regime of Cameroon's President Biya against English-speaking communities in the west of the country, which were formerly known as British Cameroon, communities to whom we owe a historic responsibility. They quoted in The Guardian the ordinary men and women who saw their villages attacked by Biya's military, who saw their neighbours and family members killed, and that they were forced to flee for their lives. They quoted the charity workers who were looking after thousands of displaced women and children for whom they warned going home would be suicide. Now, by any normal moral standard, you would expect the UK government to read those reports and be appalled. But not this government. The very next day after that report was published, the British Trade Secretary announced a £1.5 billion deal with a British national gas company and President Biya's regime. A deal which, in the words of the Trade Department's press release, will, quote, generate a huge stream of revenue for Cameroon's public treasury. In other words, we have a regime ranked as the 25th most corrupt in the world, a ruler in his 43rd year of autocratic power, with a personal wealth of over $200 million, engaged in a systematic campaign of brutality and killings against English-speaking community in his country, and all the government can do is boast of doing trade deals which will only enrich him further. That, in my mind, is what this government means by global Britain.
In June, the Trade Secretary hailed a new £1.5 billion natural gas deal with President Biya's regime in Cameroon in a government press release entitled "International Visits Pay Off." So can the Minister tell us, did the Trade Secretary not know about the Biya regime's ongoing persecution and massacres in Cameroon's English-speaking regions, or did he just not care?
Yeah.
Order. Questions to the Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs, Tonia Antoniazzi.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Minister Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UK regularly discusses the violence in Cameroon with international partners, including France and the United States. I welcome French support for the recent UK-Austria joint UN Human Rights Council statement about the deteriorating situation in Cameroon.
Antoniazzi.
Southern Cameroon voted to join French Cameroon as federated states equal in status, but this is clearly not what has happened. They are treated as a region made up of second-class citizens. The UK has a duty to the Southern Cameroons to use all available instruments in order to find a solution to the growing crisis. A solution which takes into account the wishes of the people of the Southern Cameroon. Will the Secretary of State meet with me and the delegation of Southern Cameroons to discuss possible solutions?
Well, can I start by congratulating the Honourable Lady for getting this number 1 on the order paper today, because it has been a worsening crisis and the UK has been strongly engaged with our international partners to try and find a way forward. With respect to the territorial integrity of Cameroon, of course the UK recognises the territorial integrity of Cameroon, but we also believe that where there are calls for more autonomy in the southwest and the northwest, that the government of Cameroon needs to engage in an inclusive political dialogue, because currently the violence from both sides is leading to really serious situations for civilians on the ground.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In her discussions with US counterparts about the worrying situation in Cameroon, has the Minister been able to ask them about suggestions that have been made, that resources that they've given to help the Cameroonian government in the fight against terror, Boko Haram, may be being diverted and misused and used in attacks on some of the communities in Cameroon?
Mr. Speaker, as I often find myself saying in these questions, I'm happy to be accountable in terms of what the UK government has been doing. I can confirm that the UK government has extensive discussions, not only with the government of Cameroon, who, as my right honourable friend will know, are a partner with the international community in terms of the fight against Boko Haram and the Islamic State of West Africa in the north of the country. But also, of course, we have discussions with international partners about a way forward in terms of the views expressed with increasing violence by those of a separatist tendency in the southwest and northwest provinces.
Listen to you, Les.
Much, Mr. Speaker. One of my constituents is a member of the South Cameroonian diaspora and is deeply concerned with what's going on. A recent Amnesty report noted the presence of arbitrary arrest, torture in detention, and the existence of secret and illegal detention facilities in Cameroon. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that such activities are a stark violation of the Commonwealth Charter? And if so, what efforts has she made as a Minister to engage with Cameroon through the Commonwealth?
Well, the Honourable Lady is absolutely right to raise the range of different human rights violations and abuses that were noted in the statement that we were very pleased that 39 countries signed up to at the most recent UN Human Rights Council. Specifically with regard to the Commonwealth, I can tell the House that Lord Ahmed, the Minister for the Commonwealth, wrote to the Commonwealth Secretary-General recently to share UK concerns about Cameroon and press for further Commonwealth engagement on the matter.
The UK's aim is to be the largest G7 investor in Africa by 2022. Will any of this investment be going to Cameroon?
Indeed, my honourable friend states the UK's policy in terms of aiming to be an ambitious investor in terms of inward investment into African economies. And I can confirm that there are UK companies that invest in Cameroon, and certainly that is absolutely something that businesses are free to choose to do. I think in terms of the political track, though, that we are trying to engage with the government of Cameroon. I spoke to the Prime Minister there recently to encourage them to find a way forward in terms of political and inclusive dialogue that can address some of the concerns that are being raised.
Speaker, I spent time in Cameroon in 2013 as a political volunteer with VSO, and it breaks my heart to see what is happening to that beautiful country today. It seems to me we have a very potent mix of contemporary challenges and the long tail of our own and indeed French colonial history here. Can we have a two-pronged approach to this? Can we first of all have our colleagues in DFID tackling the urgent crises that there are with displaced peoples in conflict, and then from her own office a proper effort to get a diplomatic solution here?
Well, the Right Honourable Gentleman was absolutely right that there is an ongoing humanitarian crisis, and earlier this year I did authorise that we would work through UNICEF to provide the immediate assistance in terms of humanitarian needs. Over 400,000 people have been displaced in this crisis, over 30,000 have fled into Nigeria, and I can say that DFID is working in terms of programming, and we're also urging the government to allow access for humanitarian actors into all parts of Cameroon.
Liz McInnes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Human Rights Watch said last week, and I quote, "Government forces in Cameroon's Anglophone regions have killed scores of civilians and torched hundreds of homes over the past 6 months. So can I ask the Minister of State, how many more innocent civilians need to be slaughtered for Cameroon to be suspended by the Commonwealth?"
Well, she's absolutely right that there have been human rights abuses and human rights violations from all sides in this conflict, and there have been hospitals burnt, there have been villages that have been torched, and we drew attention to a range of these different issues in terms of the statement that we made at the United Nations Human Rights Council, which the UK sponsored. And in terms of the Commonwealth, I can confirm that obviously the UK is one of the members of the Commonwealth and has, through our Commonwealth Minister, written to the Commonwealth Secretariat and suggested that the Commonwealth Secretariat encourage discussions on this topic in terms of future meetings.
Before we move to question 2 in the name of the Honourable Gentleman Member for Cleethorpes, I hope the whole House will want to join me in extending a very warm welcome to Gareth Evans QC, who served with great distinction as a Cabinet Minister in Australia from 1983 to 1996 under, if memory serves me, the Hawke and Keating governments. And as we've just been talking about human rights, let's not forget that he was a key architect of the United Nations responsibility to protect. We celebrate that achievement, and many people around the world, sir, will be thankful to you for your leadership on that front. Question 2, Mr. Martin Vickers.
Number 2, Mr. Speaker.
Foreign Commonwealth Affairs, Secretary Jeremy Hunt.
Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure to interrupt a mammoth cabinet meeting to enjoy the harmony and consensus for which this House is famous. With permission, I will take this question with questions 4, 17 and 22. The UK has long championed freedom of religion, but I think we should do more for the estimated 240 million